Scott believed he understood his two cats, Bear and Teddy, completely. He knew how they started their mornings, where they liked to rest by the fire, and how they would leave through their cat door every day for long trips around the neighborhood. He was sure they were just exploring, like all cats do. But sometimes the lives we think we know completely are hiding secrets that can turn upside down everything we thought was true. Sometimes one small moment can show us a whole, hidden world that was there all along, right in front of us. In a quiet neighborhood in England, two cat brothers called Bear and Teddy lived together in complete peace. They were best friends who had never been apart, sharing every single moment together. Both cats were beautiful brown tabbies with bright green-yellow eyes and striped fur that made them look like tiny tigers. Bear was bigger, a large, sweet cat with a kind heart who greeted people with his special wow-wow sound. He loved to talk, always making little noises like he was trying to tell people something important. Teddy was smaller, but just as loving, with the same beautiful tabby fur and smart, bright eyes, always copying whatever his big brother did. Every morning, they would always start their day the same way, warming up together by the fireplace, their fur touching as they enjoyed the heat. After eating breakfast, they would check every part of their yard, chasing butterflies and sniffing around for interesting smells. Then, like they were following a schedule, both cats would go through their cat door and disappear into the world outside their house, going on adventures that lasted for hours. Scott and his girlfriend had gotten completely used to this daily routine. While they were at work, Bear and Teddy would vanish into the neighborhood, always coming back home safely by evening. The couple never wondered exactly where their cats went during these long trips away. They simply believed their cats were exploring around the area and having fun with their freedom. "They're probably just walking around the gardens," Scott would say to his girlfriend when she wondered about where they went every day. "You know cats, they love to explore new places." Life went on peacefully like this for months, until one terrible day when everything changed forever. Bear died suddenly without any warning at all. There were no signs he was sick, nothing that showed something was wrong. One moment he was his usual loving self, and the next moment he was gone. Why he died stayed a complete mystery, leaving Scott and his girlfriend searching desperately for answers they would never get. The house became filled with a thick, choking sadness. Bear's familiar sounds were gone, his soft purring, his special greeting calls, the quiet sound of his paws walking on the floor, and this emptiness seemed to fill every single room. Scott and his girlfriend were heartbroken, fighting to accept that their beloved Bear would never come home again. "I keep thinking I'll hear his wah-wah when I come through the door," Scott told his girlfriend through his tears. "The house feels so empty without him." Teddy, who had never lived a single day without his brother, was hurt the most. The cat, who used to be playful and full of energy, became quiet and sad. He would sit for hours by the window, looking out at the yard where he and Bear used to play together. He barely ate and seemed to be looking everywhere for his missing friend. Even though he was clearly sad, Teddy kept doing his daily routine of leaving the house. Even without Bear next to him, he still went through the cat door each day and disappeared for hours. Scott and his girlfriend found this both sweet and heartbreaking. It looked like Teddy was still following the same path he had always taken with his brother. "At least he's still going outside," his girlfriend said sadly. "Maybe it helps him deal with losing Bear." Exactly 2 weeks after Bear died, when everyone in the house was still deep in sadness, something completely surprising happened that would change everything. Teddy came back from one of his lonely walks, and Scott right away saw something strange. There was a small piece of white paper carefully tied to Teddy's collar with a thin piece of string. "What's this?" Scott said, getting down on his knees to look at the note. "Teddy, what do you have here?" Scott's hands shook as he carefully untied the paper and opened it. The handwritten message, written in slightly broken English, said, "Dear owner, I'm your neighbor, living in 4. I'm also your cat's close friends as they, 2 cats, are used to coming to my room every day. But one of them, a bigger one, has disappeared for 2 weeks. Is he okay? I'm so worried about him. He is so lovely cat and always touched my heart. Wish he is fine." YT March 2nd, 2017. Scott stared at the note in complete shock, reading it over and over before the words really hit him. "You have to see this," he called to his girlfriend, his voice full of amazement. When she read the note, her eyes got huge with disbelief. "Are you saying," she said slowly, "that our cats have been visiting someone else this whole time, and we never knew?" They both looked down at Teddy, who was sitting quietly at their feet, like he was waiting for them to understand the message he had brought them. The truth hit them like a huge wave. Bear and Teddy hadn't just been walking around the neighborhood with no purpose. They had been building a real friendship with someone who loved them deeply. "This person has been worried sick about Bear for 2 weeks," Scott said, his voice almost breaking. "They don't know what happened to him." The couple spent the evening talking about what to do. They felt amazed at finding out about their cat's secret life, and sad knowing they had to tell this caring neighbor the heartbreaking news. Finally, they decided to write back. Scott carefully wrote a response, explaining that Bear had died suddenly and that they were sorry their neighbor had been worrying about him. They included their email address, hoping to learn more about this person who had clearly loved Bear as much as they did. "We had no idea Bear and Teddy were visiting anyone," Scott wrote in the note. "We're touched to know that Bear brought happiness to your life. Please contact us at this email address so we can talk more." The next morning, they tied their reply to Teddy's collar and watched as he left on his daily trip. That evening, when they checked their email, they found a long, heartfelt message waiting for them. The person who wrote it introduced herself as a Taiwanese exchange student who was studying at the local university. She explained that when she first came to England, she felt incredibly lonely and homesick. The language barrier made it hard for her to make friends, and she often felt alone in her small apartment at house number 4. "Then, one day, about 6 months ago, I heard a soft scratching at my door," she wrote. "When I opened it, I found 2 beautiful cats sitting there, looking up at me with such friendly eyes. I was so surprised and happy to see them." She described how Bear and Teddy had somehow picked her as their friend, coming back to visit her every single day without fail. Bear, being the bigger and more confident one, had quickly become her special companion. "Bear was amazing," she continued in her email. "He was just like an angel for me. He seemed to know that I was lonely. He would sit with me for hours while I studied, never wanting anything except to be close to me. When I had to practice my presentations for university, he would lie on my bed and listen to every word, like he was really paying attention. He was such a good listener when I needed a person to help me rehearse my presentations." The student explained that Bear's company had been incredibly comforting during her hardest times. "Sometimes I would come home after a difficult day at university, feeling frustrated with my English or missing Taiwan, and Bear would be waiting by my door. It was like he knew exactly when I needed a friend." She had even taken several photos of Bear and Teddy during their visits, which she included with the email. The pictures showed Bear lying happily on her bed, Teddy curled up on a chair, and both cats looking completely comfortable in her small apartment, though some photos caught them being quite naughty and playful around her things. For Scott and his girlfriend, seeing these photos was both wonderful and emotional. They were new pictures of Bear that they had never seen before. I called them my study buddies, the student wrote. Bear especially helped me practice my English. I would read my homework out loud to him, and he would sit there so patiently, like the most understanding teacher in the world. Reading her words, Scott felt tears starting in his eyes. "Listen to this," he said to his girlfriend, his voice thick with emotion. "She says Bear helped her feel less homesick. He was like a piece of home for her. Sometimes Bear would come to my apartment just to sleep on my sofa," she had written in another part of her email. "His gentle snoring actually helped me stay awake and focused on my studies. It was such a comforting sound when I felt lonely." The student's email went on with more details about their daily routine. "Every morning around 10 a.m., I would hear their soft paws on my doorstep. I started leaving my door slightly open so they could come and go as they wanted. Bear would always greet me with this special sound, like wow wow, and I knew it was his way of saying hello." Scott's breath stopped when he read this. "That's Bear's greeting," he whispered. "He did the same thing with us. That was his special sound." The most touching part of her message came near the end. "When Bear stopped coming 2 weeks ago, I thought maybe you had moved away or that he was sick. I've been watching for him every day, hoping to see his big, gentle face at my door again. Your cats didn't just visit me. They saved me from the loneliness of being so far from home. Bear, especially, became like family to me." Her email ended with a note that showed just how overwhelmed she was by her sadness. "I have so many stories about him to tell you, but I'm so sorry. At this moment, I cannot keep a clear mind to write properly." After reading the whole email, Scott immediately wrote back, sharing the full story of Bear's sudden death and inviting the student to visit them. "We had no idea how much Bear meant to you," he wrote. "Please come and see us whenever you'd like. We buried Bear in our garden, and you're welcome to say goodbye to him." A few days later, on a quiet afternoon, there was a gentle knock at their door. When Scott opened it, he found a young woman standing there with a beautiful bouquet of white flowers in her hands and tears running down her face. "Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much." "My name is YT," she said quietly, her voice trembling with feeling. "I'm the person who left you the message." "Please, come inside," Scott said kindly, moving to one side to let her into their house. The three of them sat down together in the front room where Bear and Teddy used to keep warm near the fire. The student, whose real name was Yu Ting, told them more about being friends with the cats. "Bear seemed to know exactly how I felt," she said, wiping tears from her face. "When I really missed home, he would stay with me longer than normal, like he could tell I needed extra help feeling better. Sometimes I would cry while doing my schoolwork, missing my family in Taiwan, and Bear would come over and rest his head on my arm." She pulled out her phone to show them more pictures. Photos of Bear sleeping peacefully on her desk while she worked on homework. Pictures of both cats eating special treats she had bought just for them, and videos of Bear coming when she called his name. "I worked extra hours at my job to save money for special cat food," Yu Ting told them. "I wanted them to be happy when they came to see me." "We had no idea they were visiting you," Scott said, shaking his head in wonder. "They were living a whole other life we didn't know about." Scott and his girlfriend looked at each other in amazement. Their cats had been living a completely different life that they never knew about, helping someone who really needed it. "Would you like to see where we put Bear to rest?" Scott asked gently. Yu Ting nodded, holding her flowers close to her chest. They walked together to the backyard, where a small stone showed where Bear was buried. Yuting got down on her knees next to the spot and carefully placed her white flowers around the marker. "Thank you, Bear," she whispered so quietly they could barely hear her. "Thank you for being my friend when I needed one the most. Thank you for helping me feel less alone in this big, frightening world." She stayed there for several minutes without speaking, saying her own private goodbye to the cat who had been so important to her. Scott watched with tears in his eyes. "It hurt so much," he would say later, but it was also beautiful to see how much Bear had meant to someone else. When she finally got up, she turned to Scott and his girlfriend with tears running down her face. "Thank you for sharing such an amazing cat with everyone," she said, her voice full of thanks. "I know you didn't know we were friends, but Bear gave me something special. He showed me that good things happen everywhere, even when you're far away from home." Scott felt his own eyes getting watery. "It makes you feel good that he could make other people's lives brighter, not just ours," he said, words he would share with others later. "We never knew Bear was helping someone else the same way he helped us." As Yuting got ready to go, she bent down to pet Teddy, who had been watching everything quietly. "You can still come visit me whenever you want," she told him softly. "My door will always be open for you, just like it was for Bear." From that day on, Scott and his girlfriend kept talking with Yuting. She became part of their bigger family, and Teddy kept making his daily trips to her apartment, continuing what he and Bear had started together. The sadness of losing Bear was still there. Scott still waited to hear his special "wow-wow" sound every time he came home, still felt something missing when only one cat came running to meet him instead of two. "It's the small things, too," he would think about later. Like when Teddy is inside, you can now close the other doors, knowing there's no other cat that might come through, or not hearing the cat door when Bear used to come in late after Teddy to eat. But now, their sadness was mixed with something wonderful, knowing that Bear's kindness had gone beyond their home to help someone who really needed it. Bear hadn't just been their special pet. He had connected different worlds, bringing comfort to a young woman far from home, and showing that love can show up in the most surprising places. Bear was gone, but his love would continue forever. What he left behind lived not only in Scott and his girlfriend's memories, but in the strength he had given Yuting during her loneliest times, and in proving that even in a strange country, kindness finds the people who need it most. Did you like this story? Would you invite a stranger into your home based on a note from your pet, like Scott did? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Small acts of kindness can have big impacts on people we never even meet. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.